I'm John Bozzella. Welcome to the Detroit Auto Show.
In this episode, John is on the floor at the North American International Auto Show in Detroit.
Don't film me, film that. Look at that. A Made in America supercar.
What are you doing here?
It's the Detroit Auto Show. I'm always here.
John is joined by Daniel Howes of the Detroit News to talk about the history of the auto show, where the auto industry is going, and some of the challenges facing global automakers in 2019.
So Daniel, it's good to see you.
Good to see you.
How are you?
Good. Good.
So I got to tell you, so we've known each other a long time, although I haven't seen you in a little while. You know, this is my 25th Detroit Auto Show. I started with Ford Motor Company 25 years ago, and my first week on the job, I came to the Detroit show.
You know, if I had to think about mine, it would go back to the mid-90s,
Yeah,
probably.
right.
So it's roughly the same. And, you know, I went to Germany for 4 years, but I came back for the Detroit Auto Show every year. And quite a spectacle. You know, in the late 90s, there were parties every night.
Right.
One manufacturers,
Yeah.
Ford night, GM night, Chrysler night, none of that.
Right. It was all the glitz, sizzle, all that stuff.
Oh, big productions.
Yeah.
Nobody was better at that than Chrysler, with driving through plate glass windows,
Yes.
and driving out through plate glass windows, and leapfrogging the competition. None of that here.
So let's talk about that a little bit. So, you know, the show has changed,
Mm-hmm.
but the industry has changed here in the United States too, right? So back in the, mid-90s, when we were first coming to the show, there were a handful of car companies from outside the United States that were building cars here. Now you've got 15 car companies producing cars here in the United States, or soon to be, 11 of whom are international nameplate manufacturers. So think about that over the last 25 years. How's the industry changed in your mind? And has this change been, for the better?
Well, there's no question that the United States is the battleground, I think, for brands. But it's interesting. Some of those international manufacturers aren't here. They're making vehicles in the American South predominantly, the Germans, and they're not here. And I would submit to you they're not going to come back, based upon what we see now. The show is not an industry show anymore. It's not a media show, although media comes to get access. They've wanted to go back to a consumer show. That this is about the consumers. This is not a you gotta come. And it's interesting, as I was thinking about, because I wrote a column about this last week. You know, the arc of the show, the 20 years that you're talking about, John, was the global era for this industry. It was the big transatlantic Daimler Chrysler deal. It was the Renault Nissan deal. It was these people that were larger than life. Carlos Ghosn, who's now sitting in a Tokyo jail.
Right. So it's, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I think what you're saying is really interesting. The show is changing. And so you're saying that, you've got companies like Daimler who aren't here at the show, but they're big time here in America.
Oh, yeah.
And so there's an irony here, which is, okay, so the show is different, but the industry here in America is vibrant, it's competitive, and you got a lot of manufacturing here, right?
That's right. But the other thing is those same manufacturers, they're going to be in New York in April, or whenever I think it'd be April. They were in Los Angeles. They're going to be on the coast because that's where the money and the customers are. That's not where they're making the vehicles, by the way, but that's where they're selling the vehicles. Yeah. And never mind the fact that they all want to go to New York or they want to go to LA, bring their wives and girlfriends along with them, just so they can have a good time.
Yeah.
But it has changed, and I think it will continue to change. The other thing that's really different is manufacturers have the ability now to measure everything. They can measure audience. They can measure return on investment. They can say, if I spend X hundreds of thousands of dollars to do a press conference at the Detroit Auto Show, I'm going to get this return. If, on the other hand, I spend X minus 20% or 25% to do my own event a week before the auto show, or General Motors is having journalists out to Santa Barbara, I believe, Southern California, next week. And they're going to be doing a bunch of product reveals in California to cap a captive audience. They didn't do one here.
Yeah, it's a very different model.
Yep.
So, you're a journalist, you're an editor, you're a columnist, you're somebody who knows the industry intimately as much as you can and not be part of it. So you talk to a lot of people. You talk to CEOs, you talk to senior executives. So what are you hearing about sort of where we are from an industry perspective? You know, you hear other experts say, hey, gee, we might be at the top of the auto cycle. What's the vibe you're getting right now about where the business is?
The vibe, I think, is generally positive, but that's kind of counterbalanced by restructuring moves you're seeing coming from General Motors, principally, and Ford, although it's taking Ford a really long time to unspool what its restructuring plans are. But generally, I think they're pretty positive about North America. That said, I think you're looking at the most tumultuous year this industry has seen since 2009. I think you're going to see a lot of really tense standoffs. You've got UAW negotiations coming up for the Detroit Big Three. You've got General Motors that is on the road to closing 5 North American plants, 2 of which are in Southeast Michigan. And my best information is that those are not on the bubble. They are likely to close pending UAW negotiations, that they will have to negotiate the closure or the status of those plants. But they're not going to be getting new product, at least not going to be getting new cars and vehicles of some kind. It could be repurposed by a supplier or somebody else, or Elon Musk, who has expressed interest, but I don't know what's going to happen.
So this is interesting, right? So you use the word tumultuous, I think. So now let's add some more uncertainty to the mix, right? So you have a public policy environment on top of that, right? So we've got consideration of tariffs on auto imports and auto parts imports. We have uncertainty about whether NAFTA will actually be replaced by the new renegotiated USMCA, what will happen with regard to bilateral deals with the US and Japan, what's going to happen with the tariffs in China. So and your conversations with, leaders in the industry, what are you hearing about that? More uncertainty? It affects investment decisions, cost?
I'll give you 2 great examples. Ram, FCA's Ram, their heavy-duty pickup, has not been certified by the EPA, the 3500, because of the shutdown. So you've got the shutdown going on, and they're not able to certify this truck that they're launching.
And so for people who are listening who don't understand what that means, every new vehicle has to be certified by the federal government to be able to be entered into commerce.
Enter into commerce. Second example, GAC Motor, the Chinese manufacturer from Guangzhou, had plans to come into the U.S. market at the end of this year, the 3rd or 4th quarter of 2019, and that they announced at last year's show. Yesterday they confirmed, and I sat and had an interview with their CEO, and he confirmed that the main reason that they're not going to be here until at least the second half of 2020 is because of the tariff situation. It is uncertain, and the president has proposed a 25% tariff on imported vehicles, and that wouldn't just be Chinese vehicles, it would be any vehicles that are made outside the United States, which would include Detroit brands, it would include Japanese brands, it would include Korean brands, German brands, Italian brands, down the list, which would wreak havoc with the business. I don't think there's any question about it. The president, on one level, doesn't understand this, and on another level, he understands it perfectly.
So break that down for me. When you say he doesn't understand it, what doesn't he understand? And when you say he understands it perfectly, what do you mean?
When he understands it perfectly, there was a quote attributed to him that I used in a column where he described the car as king. It is a national source of national pride in the United States, Germany, Japan, South Korea, China. And if you put a tariff on that, you will get the attention of the entire power structure of each of those countries. And he's exactly right.
Yeah, so this is now, so there's 2 theories about the president and tariffs. One theory is that it's a negotiating tactic, to your point, right? I've gotten their attention. Right. And so now I can negotiate better deals and deal with some of these trade imbalances. The second theory is I actually do like tariffs, and I do want to put up these economic walls so that fewer imports come in and there's less competition. Which of those 2 theories do you ascribe?
Both. I think it's both for this president. Look, and the third thing is I think the president thinks that people like Mary Barra, the CEO of General Motors, works for him, and she doesn't. And she's made that abundantly clear. They announced these plants that are on the bubble. She goes to Washington. She goes to explain it to the White House. She goes and meets with Larry Kudlow, the economic advisor. She goes to the Hill. She talks to the Hill. Senators, Congress people are all lobbying her. And the short answer is no. because they have been through a meltdown. They went off the cliff in 2009, and they will not be put there again. And that's why you see them in front of a lot of other people making decisions, because and plus they have the worst capacity problem in the United States. They got too much unused plant capacity. It's too costly, and if they don't move on it, it's going to get worse. And then when things start to spiral down, you can't cut fast enough.
Yeah, so we've talked about the cyclical dynamics of the industry and then the policy implications or the policy challenges that could go on top of that. Let me talk to you a little bit about what I would call the structural dynamics in the industry, real structural changes, more electrification, more automation. So what are you hearing and seeing here in that space? And do you think that the companies you're talking to are bullish on these technological advancements and that there's great opportunity to get driverless vehicles into the hands of customers in the near future? Do you think there's a little bit more hesitation on the kinds of technologies we're talking about? Where do you think folks are on that?
I think it's a two-track kind of thing. I think they very much believe that it's a technology that will be realized, but I think there is some frustration and some concern that people are getting the wrong impression that it's just around the corner, that it's going to be for everybody, that you're going to have to hand in your keys to your Ford F-150 pickup truck and be picked up at your home by a little pod that's going to take you to the doctor's office, and it's going to happen in the next 18 months. That's not the case. Dan Ammon, who was the president of General Motors, who recently became the CEO of GM Cruise, their autonomous vehicle unit, is fond of saying, we're in a race to the starting line. Okay, we haven't started.
Right.
We're in the pre-race, and that's where it's really happening. Just I think last week, there was an organization that was launched out at CES called PAVE, and I can't remember. It's about.
It's about public education.
Public
That's
awareness for public autonomous vehicle education. I think that's what it is.
That's right.
And it's because the manufacturers recognize that the media hype and the Wall Street and investor hype, a lot of which centers around Tesla and that whole story, has gotten way far out ahead of where the technology is. And I think that's one of, and the other thing you have coming together is you have the auto industry globally, which is highly regulated. It probably makes one of the most regulated products in the market today, coming together with Silicon Valley, which is a non-regulated industry where innovation, risk-taking, and failure is embraced. Failure in the auto industry means people die.
Right, so you have this culture clash of industry sectors. And so we talk a lot about convergence and collaboration and partnerships that are taking place, but they're coming from very, very different cultural outlooks.
That's right, and I think what you're seeing now is a shaking out on both sides. Silicon Valley realizing that, hey, making a car is not easy, and the margins are terrible, and you have to deal with all sorts of government regulation, and you have to get blessed here and blessed there and validation and all this other kind of stuff. We don't have to do that when we're doing smartphones or whatever we're doing. And that is a real education process. And I think what people are finding is that the auto companies may be better positioned because they have a tradition of integrating new technologies into their products. I mean, anybody that comes to this auto show and walks around will see how sophisticated these vehicles are, whatever the price point, even at the lower levels, whether they're import, whether they're Detroit, whether they're made down south, it doesn't matter. All of it is much more sophisticated, and this industry has come a long way in integrating.
So two more questions. So one, what I see on the floor in one maybe small, maybe mid-sized way is sort of a dichotomy here between no more sedans. There are certain companies that have gotten out of the car business, focusing on light trucks, pickup trucks, CUVs, and I see companies that are showing electric vehicles. So, I think if you look at sales numbers, there's very, very low demand right now.
Exactly right.
For electric vehicles. There's low demand, relatively speaking, for sedans and coupes. and there's high demand for crossovers and SUVs and pickup trucks. So what are the companies that are showing more electric vehicles? Do they know something that other companies don't know? Are companies trying to hedge their bets? What's happening here with this dynamic in the marketplace?
I think they're more trying to hedge their bets, frankly. They know, they can see the trends, but what they also can see is that the largest market in the world is mandating the use and the adoption of electric vehicles, and that's not the United States, it's China. And you have to play, if you had to play in two places around the world, you would play in China and in the United States, because those are the two markets to play in.
Right.
And the American manufacturers particularly have made that move into SUVs of all shapes and sizes. And people need to understand that the modern compact SUV has the same engine that the compact car has in it. And it delivers the same fuel economy, it's just a different body style.
Yes.
And it may have a little different aerodynamics in terms of, and that would affect the gas mileage. But they're moving into that because
the idea of what is a truck these days and what is a car these days, those ideas are very different. The lines are much more blurred than they were 25 years ago when we first started coming here.
No question. But the industry, I think, and particularly Detroit, the Detroit-based industry, is in a situation where they look at the competition, they look at the high-tech competitors who are swimming in cash, and they have got to maximize their performance of their core business, making cars, or mostly trucks and SUVs.
Right, because you've got to earn a return to be able to invest in those transformational technologies that you're talking about, right? So automated vehicle technologies changing toward electrification, these are not inexpensive shifts in the industry, right? So you've got to make money to be able to invest in that shift.
And if you are a Ford or a General Motors, and you're sitting on $25, $30 billion in cash and liquidity, and Apple has $250 billion, as an example, and what Google, I don't know what the number, we could look it up, what the number, but it's of that magnitude. These are the people that you're playing against. And these are the people that are in this race. And why are they in the race? Because this is where the growth is, and it's where the opportunity is, because it's not in mobile phones.
Yes.
It's in a new segment, and the new segment is transportation and personal transportation.
Right, we talk about IoT, the Internet of Things. The ultimate thing in the Internet of Things is the car. So last question, biggest risk that you see for the industry in the next 2 to 3 years, and the biggest opportunity that you see for the industry in the next 2 to 3 years?
I think the biggest risk is the Trump administration, because I think the public policy agenda could derail this economy. We've already seen glimmers of that. The president understands that. He's very fixated on the equity markets. December was a terrible month for investors. It was a terrible month for the administration. I think a lot of people in the industry were looking at what was going on and saying the fundamentals of the economy are strong, the consumer is strong, the consumer is spending, and wants more vehicles. And this week we've heard people pretty bullish again about 2019, thinking it's going to be almost as good as 2018. So I think the public policy agenda is something that could derail them. Opportunity, I would say, is there a car company out there that is going to be able to hit its target and actually display an autonomous vehicle in a confined space in an urban area and actually deliver people from point A to point B?
Right.
I think General Motors thinks they're on track for that for this year. I think a couple other players think they could be on track for that. That could signify a bit of a breakthrough. It won't be a breakthrough in the major sense of it, but I think that could be a real opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, Daniel, it's been great visiting with you, so thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Visit globalautomakers.org to see more. Like Global Automakers on Facebook and follow them on Twitter.